fascinating numbers and facts that you share with us. But you left many questions still open. We're still trying to find the answer to how to make money from digital publishing. We saw how O'Reilly is making money from digital publishing. But for someone who has been in this publishing business, how do they see this question and how do they learn from information that you shared? How do they make money from getting into digital publishing?
That's a very good question, and I think there are two important answers to that question. One, and this is something that you see with our content, is that we try very hard to make sure that it is available for sale wherever someone is looking for it and might be interested in buying it. We offer multiple different formats for sale and download. We also, as you saw with Safari, we offer different methods of access to that content. So people can buy individual books. They can buy multiple books at one time. They can buy combinations of print and digital books. They can also buy subscription access to not only all of our books, but the books of many of our largest competitors as well as part of a single library. One of the important points, again, is something that one of my colleagues calls content ubiquity. So trying to make what you have available for purchase wherever someone might be willing to buy it. And the second point, and it's related to the first one, is the opportunities that are represented by the emerging mobile markets. Of course, the largest one most people think about is on the iPhone with the App Store, but there are many others coming out now on Android and other devices. And a lot of publishers come to me and they say, well, the iPhone is people are going to on their phones and they're not going to be going to bookstores. And that may be true. But my response to that is there are now 50 million people walking around the world with a bookstore in their pocket. It's a bookstore that is always open. It's a bookstore that they have with them everywhere they go. And it's a bookstore that they can buy your content with a single push. So we see the emerging mobile markets as an enormous opportunity to reach new customers and reach them in ways and in times and in places that we never could have reached them before.
Okay, I think there are a lot of questions from the audience, but there were questions submitted before this event from the event website, and I'm going to address a few of them in just a couple minutes. But let me drill a little deeper here. I noticed most of the examples you shared with us are new content, new books. Especially most of the books O'Reilly sells are computer or web-related books. So that audience, the reader audience for those books, naturally our web audience or primary reading environment would be the web. But what would you say to a group of publishers and writers who are not in that domain, who are not in the web content, web book domain, rather than in the traditional life books, education books that we see, that we read most of the time? How would they try to make money? How would they make money from digital publishing as opposed to what O'Reilly and O'Reilly's target customers tend to be more web and computer related?
That's very true, and that's a criticism that we receive a lot, that our audience is very technical and is different from that of other publishers. And in some ways that is true. Though, again, I will point out that our audience is more technical and more web-oriented than most, but that's only because they tend to be early to new technologies and are doing things that the rest of us will be doing soon. Our audience was very early to the web, was very early to email, was very early to a lot of the things that all of us now see as part of our lives. That said, I think it's instructive to look at some of the other areas of the industry, and I can really speak only knowledgeably about what I see in North America. But two of the types of publishers that are doing the most interesting and innovative things are in the types of publishing are romance publishers and religious publishers. So in terms of religious publishers, one of the most popular categories of apps in the App Store and ebooks on the Amazon Kindle are religious texts and versions of the Bible. So, you know, in that case, you're talking about not only is it an audience that is not traditionally thought of as very technically oriented, but we're also talking about content that in many cases is not only freely available, but thousands of years old. So, you know, as I mentioned while I was talking, a lot of it is more about packaging and convenience than about the content itself. In the sense of both the romance and religious publishers, these are readers who like to have a lot of different types of material related to the topics that they enjoy with them all the time. So they can read wherever they happen to be. And that is not limited to the kind of audience that we have, the more technical audience. And I think those two types of publishers demonstrate that there are opportunities, as you saw with Disney's new venture of offering subscription access to children's books, with a lot of heavy marketing at grandparents and parents in a market that is not really thought of as very technically savvy or web-oriented.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a good example, the digital bookstore from Disney. I think it's a business model innovation as opposed to a digital publishing. I love your slide about TV and radio. Your slide says the first TV shows were basically radio programs on television until someone realized that TV was a whole new medium. E-books should not just be print books delivered electronically. I think we're still at that stage, actually, here in Taiwan and in the Chinese language world. We're still at a stage of bringing print content to a digital environment, and not really doing it the O'Reilly way or the way that Disney is about to do. But I'm going to get down to some tough ones. Okay. The overriding concerns or anxieties that we see from the Chinese language publishing environment is DRM, digital rights management. About the O'Reilly DRM-free policy. I'm sure you've been asked this question quite a few times. Why do other publishers have not really followed O'Reilly? And how do you really manage that? And what suggestions do you have for this part of the world?
Very good questions and important ones. And there are other publishers who are doing this. A lot of other technical publishers are doing this. And in fact, some of you may know, we recently began a strategic alliance with Microsoft to do distribution of print and digital of their Microsoft Press books. And part of that agreement is that we will distribute their e-books without any DRM. And you know, I think it is useful and instructive that a company like Microsoft is willing to do that. So part of it comes from experience. We've been doing it for many years, and as you can see, our sales, both in terms of e-books that we sell individually and through our subscription channel through Safari, are growing very, very strongly. We generally don't believe that people who would choose illicit files from some source would be likely to otherwise buy from us if they weren't available. And on the other hand, we think that if we make our material available in convenient forms at a reasonable price, and give people something that is worth paying for. So again, when they buy something from us, we're giving them multiple different formats that can work on several different devices. They don't have to worry that they need to take it off of one to another. They can have backups, that's fine with us. We give them free updates, so as we make changes or corrections, they know they can come back. They know that if they lose it, if their hard drive fails or their laptop is stolen, they can come back and get the book that they bought. And you know, I think another example of where you know, packaging and convenience really makes a difference. It's very much like with what Apple did in the US, especially with the iTunes Music Store. where despite the fact that every song that is for sale in iTunes could be discovered if you went looking for it somewhere, yet they've now sold more than 8 billion songs. And I know from my own behavior that it's much more convenient for me to press a button on my iPhone than to bother going somewhere and finding something that I don't know or trust. For us, a lot of it is the experience that we have with the web. We've been on the web since the beginning, since the very first commercial website in 1993, a site called the Graphical Network Navigator that was later sold to AOL. So we've been watching the internet and watching the web since the beginning. And there is a great essay that Tim O'Reilly wrote in 2004 called "Piracy is Progressive Taxation." And it is very much worth reading to understand our perspective on the relationship between piracy, the internet, and paper.
Piracy is a word for it. Another way to describe that, I think two very frequent behaviors that many traditional publishers are concerned about. Number one, the students. Now, with this digital publishing thing, if we really want to dive into it, e-textbooks, digital textbooks. How do you look at students copying and sharing digital textbooks rather than buying? Because from a traditional print publisher point of view, that's revenue loss, and not for a new digital publisher as possibilities gain and progressive taxation, like Mr. O'Reilly was mentioning. So one is students and the e-textbook, digital textbook situation. Another is social content sharing. The social networking thing really taking off, and people are sharing content through this social networking behavior. And how do you view that? And how do you view that as revenue or rights management for the traditional publishers?
Those are all very good questions, and I think the issue with students and e-textbooks is an important one. Just quickly on the sharing side, the reality is that for most content creators, most authors, obscurity is a far greater threat than illicit file sharing. Most authors will go out of their way to give you their book so that you will read it and recommend it to someone that you know. In terms of the student issue with e-textbooks, there's a few approaches. One is in the space of business model innovation. So, for example, something that we do with Safari Books Online is that we sell access to universities and to institutions. So we don't we're not surprised that students would not be very eager to pay us for subscription access, but we know that the universities will. So they will pay us for 20,000 seats of access for any student who's on the university. So for them, it continues to be this wonderful service the university provides, and we hope it gives them, in the early stages of their career, access to us and our material in a way that establishes a certain level of trust that they will take with them as they move on past university. Another important consideration with students and young people is part of the economic decision about file sharing. When a lot of it is because when you are a student, at least I know this was true for me, you have a lot more time than you have money. And you are often willing to exchange the thing that you have a lot of a surplus of, your time, in order to save what for you is very scarce, which is your money. So you have students who will wait the 3, 4, 6 hours to download some file and go through the hassle that it takes to do that sort of thing. However, as you get older and you move into your career, and you have a family, and you have a job, often this situation is reversed. And while, of course, it's always nice to have a bit more money, for most of us, I know for me especially, time is really my scarce resource. And I will often gladly exchange what I have in a little bit more surplus than I did when I was a student, and that's money, to save some of that time. So part of the opportunity on the student side, the file sharing side, is to get people exposed to your material and your brand and what you have to offer, so that as they grow and become much more willing to, less willing to spend the time needed to really get at that material, and more willing to exchange their money to save time, then you have an opportunity to reach them through traditional means.
Yeah. Now that you're on this topic of time and money, another big topic we're all curious about is pricing. How do you price your ebooks, and how do you manage that pricing strategy with your print books? Is there a structure? Is there a system? Is there a thought to it that we can learn from?
Sure. You know, I'm happy to go over sort of how we price things. Though I should say that we are very much at a time of experimentation and learning. So we are constantly trying new things and measuring the results to try and learn from the data. You know, we price our printed books very much the way that we always have and the way most of the print publishers do. Our ebooks that we sell through our website, our digital list price is right now it's 80% of the price of the printed book. And we also offer someone the opportunity to purchase both the electronic and the print version together for 110% of the print price. And that 80% of print price is the list price that we send to our ebook resellers like Amazon, and then they, of course, discount off of that. On the mobile side, we've discovered that this is a very price-sensitive market. So, you know, I mentioned before that this is 50 million people with a bookstore in their pocket, but it's also a movie theater, and it also plays music, and it also has video games, and it has a lot of other things competing for people's time and attention, not to mention their money. So in that space, we've done most of our pricing at $5 or $6 for our iPhone apps, which is certainly much lower than we would sell in other channels. But what we're discovering, as you saw, these are new sales. This is new business in parts of the world that we cannot effectively reach through our traditional channels. One of my favorite thinkers about business in general, but on pricing in particular, is Peter Drucker, so a management guru, and one of his sort of sins of business is to do cost-driven pricing instead of price-driven costing. So it is imperative that you price your products in a way that to what the market will pay, because you have to assume that's what your competitors will do. And only then do you have to structure your business to be able to deliver that product at a cost that will support that price. So, you know, a lot of what we've done over the past 4 years is develop a digital production and distribution tool chain that gives us the ability to very cost-effectively produce products for both print and multiple digital formats with minimal additional cost, as a way to make sure that even as the pricing pressures continue to push downward, though I think that will be offset in many ways by volume, that we can continue to serve our customers profitably.
Thank you. Very, very interesting. Price-driven costing. Bring that to the digital publishing environment. How do we really make that come true? Some technical questions. Actually, we're getting a lot of questions from the audience. Now, this formatting. Now, if you really want to get into this digital publishing business, you want to embrace as many digital writers as possible who come in and give you their content. So can you briefly describe O'Reilly's XML publishing workflow from a user level, so that I'm a user or I'm a writer, I'm a potential writer, and I want to create something, and I want to work with O'Reilly. Is there anything in terms of standards and formats that I need to work with?
That's a great question, and it's a very important one because publishers need to make sure that they're keeping their authors and their writers happy and productive. So we provide some choice on that front. So if you have a strong preference for a particular writing environment, whether that is OpenOffice or Microsoft Word or typing on paper, we will let you do that. Because what's more important to us is that the material gets written and we continue to have the book schedule. If you choose that approach, then the very first thing that we're going to do with your manuscript when you're finished, whether you give it to us in Microsoft Word or OpenOffice or PDF or handwritten on napkins, we will have that converted into DocBook XML, an XML standard format that's old and well supported. And it is from that XML that we will produce a print and multiple ebook formats. So for many of our authors, they don't need to know anything about XML, but as soon as that content comes into our doors, it's immediately turned into XML because that gives us that immediate flexibility. However, if you have an author or set of authors who are interested in participating in that feedback system that you saw there, or perhaps they have some experience working with XML directly. Many of our authors happen to be technology developers, or people who have been writing for the web for a long time and they're familiar with markup, with the kind of HTML they might use for blogging, for example. We will give them the tools to write directly in XML, and those tools include things like a repository to keep all of their revisions, and we will also automatically build multiple formats as they make changes. So from the very first day that they submit a chapter as a draft, we have a PDF of them to see that looks identical to what their book will look like, which is a nice incentive for authors to learn those new environments. Part of it, too, is that there's really not a lot of other types of people who work collaboratively with text, who write and edit and share and discuss and revise text as much as computer programmers do. It's really what they do all day, more so even than many traditional writers. And so we've tried to learn from their approach. What are the things that they do to make themselves more productive and more effective at creating and revising and editing and collaborating on text. And so we've tried to adopt many of those tools and techniques like version control, like standardized markup, like automated build processes to produce multiple outputs, and apply those to our authoring and production environments. So again, to your question, we have some flexibility there. We have authors who are going to write a certain way, especially authors who have been around for a while. But we also provide some nice incentives for new authors to be willing to experiment with direct work in XML. Again, we use DocBook XML, which is a great standard for what our purposes are. And we're also finding that as you have more people entering adulthood who have spent more of their time writing digitally than for print, they're much more comfortable in those environments.
Fascinating insights. I'm not sure if the audience caught some of the insights that you just shared. Number one, you provide the writer or the creator freedom. They can give you the content in their own format, and then you do the work. Number two, you provide writers tools, repositories, so that they can feel at ease to continue to polish their work and build this relationship so that working with you is actually, there's an added value to that relationship. But the question is, for a traditional print publisher who may not have that technical service team to do that, to provide those services and tools for these writers, what do they do? How much of O'Reilly's in-house team is dedicated to doing and providing these services for these writers? And how much of the burden would the traditional publisher would have to really bear and price into that cost in order to live in that digital world?
Sure, that's a very good question. On the one hand, I wouldn't expect every publisher to have that technical ability and infrastructure. We are fortunate in that we have a great team, and we also have the ability to learn again from a lot of our authors who are developers themselves. So in some ways, what we've done with the infrastructure that we've built, and you see this with our new alliance with Microsoft, is they are a publisher who didn't have those capabilities. at least to the extent that they felt was needed by the market. And they sought out a relationship that would give them that capability. So that was working with us, and that's something where I think you'll see that there will be service providers who will provide some of these things available for publishers. On the other hand, certainly in the early days of the web, and even more recently, many businesses, and publishers are not alone here, really didn't have the knowledge or understanding about how to work with the web, how to build a website, how to manage social networking, how to really have a good presence on the internet. And that's a combination of, you see over time that typically you have one or two people in an organization that will be eager to learn a new skill and will reach out, attend events like this, reading, take courses to sort of educate themselves, and also on the other hand, again, whether there are vendors and service providers to help bridge that gap in the meantime. So, I certainly respect that it's a challenging environment for many publishers without some of those technical resources. But we've been through it before, as we understand and adapt to new technologies and new environments. So, I think it will be a mix of existing employees willing and eager to learn new skills, along with strategic relationships with commercial partners to provide some of the services for publishers.
Okay, we're going to move out of the technical domain and back to the business part. What's O'Reilly's long-term plan, and what about the Chinese language market? And how do you see your long-term competition with Amazon, Barnes & Noble? And today we hear News Corp and Time, they're going to cooperate, and they're going to get into the digital periodicals and magazine publishing and service providing market. So how do you see all that, including the Chinese language market, and how will O'Reilly play?
Sure, it's a great question. So fundamentally, our mission as a company is changing the world by spreading the knowledge of innovators. That's our fundamental mission statement as an organization. And there's nothing in there that says we have to use books to do that. So for us, in the long run, we're most effective when we're spreading knowledge that allows other people to understand how to do the new interesting things that we see. So a lot of it is framed in terms of, there's a great piece by another well-known business thinker and writer, Clay Christensen, about thinking about what job your product does for a customer, and what other things do that job as effectively or more effectively. So you can see that on the web with Google Maps is sort of the new Rand McNally, which is a big atlas company, and Wikipedia is the new Encyclopedia Britannica. You've got a lot of it is about understanding how these new digital environments and products are doing the same job that your other products did, and maybe doing them better. So for us, if we look back to the early part of this decade, after the dot-com crash, when the market for our printed books, at the time books were about 85 or 90% of our revenue, the market collapsed. It went down 20% a year for 3 years in a row, which was not a good time for us as a company or our market. But that is also the time in which we were most effective at diversifying what we did. Again, it's about spreading knowledge. So for us, that was also getting into an events business, where we were able to have conferences and workshops and trainings to accomplish that same goal, to do that same job for our customers that the books were doing. It's also when we started Safari Books Online, which again was a new way to do the same job of providing reference access, but in a more convenient way, in a way that complemented people's increased use of the web to find information. So from a business perspective, that is really the fundamental question that you have to ask is, what job are you doing for customers? Customers don't buy products, they buy things to solve their problems. That problem may be that they are bored, that they need to learn, that they want to escape where they are, that they want to be smarter. It may be a variety of things, but they buy solutions to their problems. They don't buy your products. And that, approaching it from that perspective is a great way to start rethinking how you're delivering material. I think that example of the bird watching application is a great one. That was someone, the creator of that is actually someone who came from tech publishing, Mitch Wade. And what's great about those applications is he didn't just take a bunch of books and stick them on a mobile device. He said, this is a device that is built for accessing multimedia information, for searching, for really interacting with information in very interesting ways that just aren't possible with a book. And ultimately, the person buying that app or the printed guide to birds is buying the job of how do I identify the birds that I see when I go out on my hobby. And he's just approached it from a way of how can I do that same job, but do it better and do it differently.
I know time is actually flying past us very quickly. Last question, but we do want to get our money's worth for sure on this one. If you were to leave Taiwan with three advice to this audience, and this audience will have mostly in the publishing business people here, and a lot of them have traditional print publishing business on hand, and eager and ready, but not yet sure how to jump into digital publishing and how to make money. And also, we have a few members in the audience who are from the traditional Taiwan high-tech manufacturing sector, which is concerned about e-bikes. So can you share with us three final comments? Maybe touch on this device side of what you see on top of this digital content experience that you described already. And also, final comments and suggestions to our audience who are the traditional publishers and who's got in mind DRM, formatting, pricing, and my cash cow of print, and how do I transform myself into digital without the O'Reilly capabilities. So, what will be your final three comments?
Well, sure. I mean, it's important to remember that we didn't always have these capabilities. A lot of this stuff is stuff that we've built and acquired along the way because we felt like we needed it. In terms of the devices, I cannot overstate the importance of mobile devices and technology access. A lot of that is smartphones. A lot of that also is the kind of devices many of us are seeing with the flexible e-ink displays and those sorts of things. Just how quickly and how large that opportunity is becoming, and that was really reinforced for me when I was listening to Mary Meeker give her presentation at Web 2.0 Summit about what they were seeing about the mobile web really being the next big thing in computing and technology, and how much it is very much a global opportunity. So that is something that I certainly, for those of us who were a little bit burned last time around when e-books were supposed to take off 10 years ago, maybe a little wary of it, but what we're seeing on the mobile consumption side is just extraordinary. In terms of what to do when you're faced with trying to balance the existing business with the new one, if part of it is wanting to be the ones who disrupt your business instead of someone else doing it for you. The world and your competitors are not going to stop just because you're uncomfortable making change. I talk with a lot of people in the publishing industry who are very much worried about existing businesses and ones that are very, very, very large. And I don't know that I would be any happier in their shoes than they are. But I remind them that their competitors are emerging now. They're competitors who don't have to worry about inventory anymore with print-on-demand technology. They don't have to worry. A lot of them don't pay advances to their authors anymore. A lot of them can pay higher royalties. A lot of them don't have the kind of cost structures that existing businesses do. And you know, this sort of the response is that those competitors are going to do what they're going to do, regardless of how comfortable you are with it. So a lot of it is about going outside that comfort zone and being willing to take risks and being willing to experiment. And a lot of the stuff that we've done, we had no idea if it would work or not. You know, a lot of the early publishing that O'Reilly did was done in ways that were very wrong based on the current way of thinking in the industry at the time. But what that did was create new ways of thinking and doing that allowed us to explore new opportunities. So a lot of it is about the willingness to, another key about that, now with the digital products and the ebooks and the mobile content, it will never be cheaper than it is now to experiment and to fail. You know, it's never going to be cheaper to misprice your ebook, but learn a lot from that mistake. So now is a great time to do that kind of experimentation, to do that kind of exploration. So, you know, really building that into your organization to encourage people to try things, encourage some degree of risk-taking, to try and do that in a way that minimizes the financial risk there. And just to recognize that none of us has the answers, but we're all going to be able to learn a lot from each other as we try these new things. And I just want to reinforce that point I made a few minutes ago about thinking about the job that you do for your customers, and that can be a very profound way to really re-examine what you're doing, how you're doing it, and what the best way to serve your customers is.
Thank you, Andrew. And thank you for sharing the O'Reilly story, as well as so many wonderful insights about how to make money in the digital publishing environment. Andrew, we have an elephant in the house. We have Google coming up next to share with us. Google is also getting into this business, as no surprise to everybody. And we're very happy to have our next speaker, Google Taiwan's general manager, to share with us Google's thoughts and plans in this business, in this market, and perhaps, you know, we can learn from the elephant and not be stamped to death by the elephant. So next we have our Google speech. Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you.